Hi, Flora. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Finally, I'm
Yeah,
so glad to see you. Well, I will do a brief introduction
yeah,
and then we will start, okay?
yeah. Very
Okay.
nice.
So I'm Abelardo Marcondes. I'm the founder of LuxuryLab Global. So I'm very happy because to see Fleur, we have been seeing each other for 10 years and at least once per year. But unfortunately, we have the pandemic, so we postponed LuxuryLab Brazil and LuxuryLab Mexico that was supposed to be now in June, and it's going to be 2021. So we will start this first live for LuxuryLab with our partner, Euromonitor International. Flu Roberts is the head of luxury goods for Euromonitor International. So Flu, welcome. Thank you so much. As you know, today, in addition to be a very special day to talk to you, it's very important because one of the missions of Luxury Lab has been to bring the best information. So what is going
Yeah,
on in the luxury industry? So that's why we didn't take, we took this opportunity to wait and for Euromonitor to bring this information the most accurate possible and updated information. Also, we have been working very hard in social responsibility floor. I don't know if you know, but we have been delivering more than 5,000 foods in all Mexico. So it has been an amazing job.
wow,
Many
amazing.
volunteers, more than almost 200 volunteers by now. So it
Yeah.
has been, look, Caroline is saying hi to you.
Oh,
Uh, so,
hello.
so it has been a very it's a teamwork job that we have been doing for more than 3 weeks now, and it has been very helpful for Mexico people that are lost their employees, they are unemployed, and also people they are homeless people in Mexico. So it has been very interesting what Luxury Lab and all the volunteers that are working with us are doing. So, Fleur, let's start. Thanks
Yeah,
so much. We're going to start with the luxury market outlook worldwide, then Latin
yeah,
America, then Mexico and Brazil. Okay, so in recent years, we have had looming threats of a trade war, increased global uncertainty, and shifts in consumer behavior and values. These all have led significant shifts across the luxury goods landscape. However, not in the modern evolution of the industry, including the global financial crisis, compares to the global disruption that we are now seeing caused by the COVID-19. According to Euromonitor, the global luxury sales exceeded $1 trillion mark in 2019, with an additional 3% growth expected for 2020. However, the revised forecast for 2020 now stands at a global decline of 18%, as we saw in your webinar last week.
yeah.
So what are the main luxury categories impacted by the COVID-19 flu worldwide, and why?
Um, oh wow. First of all, in terms of the categories, obviously some categories will suffer more than others, and there's many reasons kind of around this. So in terms of the actual categories that we believe, well, I mean, overall, we don't believe any category, at least in the short term or short to medium term, will actually really benefit from the outbreak. I mean, there are some industries where certain products are benefiting, but in the world of luxury, we don't feel anyone or any category will actually benefit in the short to medium term. Um, that said, obviously, the impact will maybe last longer than others. And those categories are essentially luxury cars, luxury alcoholic drinks, and the experiential luxury category. So luxury hotels and luxury travel overall. In terms of luxury cars, I mean, already we were kind of the car industry was going through quite a difficult time before the outbreak took place, and a lot of that was on the back of, well, first of all, changes in consumer attitudes and values towards car ownership. We saw lots of consumers obviously opting from across all income groups, opting to either go into a subscription model, so renting a Porsche, for example, or having a subscription to a Porsche or a Bentley. So that was one issue that was going on. Obviously, in terms of the environment and sustainability, lots of younger consumers were moving away from buying new luxury cars and opting for car sharing. So, the likes of Uber, for example, kind of moving into that. But also on the back of the US-China trade war, in terms of the costings of manufacturing new cars as well, that was becoming increasingly challenging. So already we were seeing issues there, but obviously now, with the outbreak of COVID-19, I think consumer confidence is one major area where many consumers will not feel like buying a new luxury car, or it just is not in kind of keeping with consumer sentiment. It wouldn't be the right thing to be doing right now as buying a brand new luxury car, as much as it would be nice, I'm sure. Obviously, another thing is, actual manufacturing. So, there's also an issue there because many of the factories or car factories are based in China, which was impacted massively at the beginning of the year. So that's had, in terms of the supply chain as well, that's had an issue. In terms of travel, obviously, as we know globally, there is a kind of an overall travel ban taking place. And on the experiential side as well, so not only is travel being impacted, but luxury hotels, luxury restaurants, all the food service and hospitality areas, obviously they've been basically completely shut down for the foreseeable future. So obviously that's a massive area, and we don't believe that the travel industry will really kind of come out of this until at least 2021, maybe moving further into 2022. And similarly, kind of going back to consumer sentiment, we believe that alcoholic drinks will also, so the likes of the luxury champagne market or fine wine industry, we don't believe that there will be that element of celebration. So people wanting to or feeling it's the right thing to be splashing out on some wonderful champagne or other kind of fine wine or spirits. And it may be that also as consumers financially maybe be feeling more squeezed, they may kind of either look not to buy anything at all, or might look to kind of downgrade and go for a cheaper option instead of buying a luxury product. So, I mean, those are the three areas that we believe will be impacted. But together, these three areas account for about 68% of the luxury market, which is pretty big.
Yeah. So also during your webinar, Fleur, we saw your the numbers for the 10 countries that are contributing the most to the downgrade. And China, USA, of course, are the two markets leading this downgraded with the biggest losses in luxury sales. Additionally, USA is probably facing the deepest recession since the Great Depression. Yeah. What are the effects of such negative outlook on the two most important luxury consumer countries' economy? And also, we see also that maybe China is going to be the main market for the luxury in the future. Is that true, or should we focus on China in the next years, or what is your opinion about that?
So in terms of actual kind of downgrades, obviously the impact is massive. So should the US, so I think at the moment we have the US set at minus 25% for 2020. China is actually not so great, but given the size of the Chinese luxury market, if China does decrease by that amount, it's going to be roughly about 68 billion US dollars. Similarly, the US, they would suffer a loss of 52 billion US dollars for 2020. And this is our baseline. It maybe things could be worse than that. So this is just literally the baseline. It could be better than that. But naturally, given the fact that these are the two biggest luxury markets in the world, the impact is pretty huge. I guess the US, the impact over there kind of overall might be greater given the fact that the industry will be hit from all angles. So whilst the Chinese are the biggest spenders of luxury in the world, the US actually receive the most in terms of international, well, they receive the most in terms of Chinese spend from mainland China. So not only are consumers buying less personal luxury goods, but also the hotel industry, the travel industry, all of hospitality, will be impacted. So yeah, overall, it's the impact from these two markets is quite extensive.
Well, and talking about Mexico and Brazil, the largest markets for luxury in Latin America, gross domestic product are expected to decrease by 7% and 5% respectively in 2020. Additionally, luxury tourism contributes to a large proportion of both countries' GDP. What are the revised forecasts for both countries' luxury goods scenarios? And may we see a more protective economy in both markets to improve local consumption? What is your opinion about that?
So right now, we don't feel that, compared to many of the other markets and even some of the developing markets in the world, we don't feel that the downgrades will be as extreme in Mexico and Brazil compared to the likes of, France, the US, UK. But that said, we do expect to see negative growth. So for 2020, for Mexico, it's around -4%, and for Brazil, about -5%. So whilst these, initially don't sound massive compared to the likes of these other markets where we're looking at 26, 27% for markets like Germany and Switzerland, for example, the impact will obviously be big because they're also, the drop is much bigger because they were growing so much faster. And as you say, we have to remember that a lot of that income or that wealth in luxury comes from tourism. So naturally, that is going to have a bigger impact on the local economy overall. When you think of how many people work in luxury travel and what that provides for these communities overall. I think in terms of localism, I think that's something that we are actually going to see across the world. And I think there will be this celebration of goods made in Mexico or made in Brazil. And that's something that we were seeing anyway. Talking about heritage, talking about sustainability. So I think that's just a trend that will be amplified. But I think this localism is something that we will definitely see moving forward. And that's not just on products, but also in travel. I think people will be either forced to travel or have holidays or local or domestic holidays. So there might be a revival there from domestic consumers, or even in markets like, maybe, the UK, where, we're not really known as being a luxury travel destination, but actually it might be that consumers in the UK or travelers in the UK, we have no choice, or we just decide actually we are going to go to Cornwall for our holiday as opposed to going to some other luxury destination around the world because we have our own concerns of contagion through traveling.
And talking about the stock exchange and all the employment that these 5 biggest luxury goods corporations have provided lately, like LVMH, Kering Group, Capri Holdings, Tapestry Inc., and Richmond Group. What is the impact on that? Who are the most vulnerable group in terms of financially, or what do you think about that? What do you have Euromonitor has said about that?
So in terms of the luxury conglomerates, obviously the biggest in terms of exposure are the likes of obviously LVMH, Kering, Richemont, and then I guess in the US market looking at companies like Tapestry, or Michael Kors, kind of the more local brands. So whilst, if we take LVMH or Kering, for example, whilst their exposure is greater, we have to remember that they have much stronger supply chains. They already have very strong digital platforms, or their e-commerce platforms are very strong, and also they I guess their capital is, although there is more capital to lose, they have more capital to recover, I guess, or they won't be as hit hard as maybe a smaller brand that may actually really struggle through this period, or maybe they don't have all of those resources already to hand, or a really strong online platform, or in which case obviously it may be that they really struggle, or actually it could be that they never actually fully recover. So whilst the big five in theory are more exposed, they probably have more power to overcome this, and the infrastructure and I guess the models are already there to manage it better.
And I would like to include a new question about what is going on. We saw in some markets like China, the Hermes store, there was line outside the Hermes store. And also in France, in Paris, when we saw Zara. Zara is not a luxury brand, but we saw lines in front of Zara. And this effect people call shopping revenge.
Yeah.
Do you think it's something special for China, or do you think that can happen also in Latin America? What is your opinion about that? How that happened? We haven't seen that before.
Yeah, I think this is something that we may experience, especially in personal luxury. So across all the categories that we cover in our research, we believe personal luxury, especially things like leather goods, clothing, or even some beauty products, will fare better. Some of that is owing to the fact that they have strong digital presence. Their pricing is quite wide, so you can buy a relatively affordable luxury product versus a high-end luxury bag that costs multiple thousands of dollars. But also there's the aspirational aspect. So and here again, we look at the middle class Chinese consumer, we look at the millennials, we look at Gen Zs. And as we've already seen, so as stores are kind of opening, but also owing to the kind of aspirational nature of luxury, consumers want to go to the stores and to experience the whole. I mean, although we will probably see more moving online and becoming more experiential on the digital side. Being in the store and experiencing the store, that will always be the special and the epitome of experiencing that luxury brand. But in terms of revenge buying, I think this is something that we will see in other markets. I don't think it will be as extreme as in China, but what we also need to remember is that many consumers will. So if we take China, for example, they have no other choice but to shop in China. So they can't fly to the US, or they can't go to Hong Kong, or even like to local or Japan, where they may have traditionally shopped for luxury. So not only are they now spending all their money in China, they're not even spending money on travel. So it could even be that, we get to the end of 2020 and we realize actually, the market in China has benefited, and the downgrades that we predicted might look very different by the end of the year. Similarly, we're seeing the same trends happening in South Korea. So their consumers are, instead of traveling to buy luxury, they're spending that money. So they would have the money already to spend on luxury, but also the money that they would have spent on traveling, they're now spending on luxury. So yeah, I mean, I think we will see a small hike. Whether that will continue is another thing, but we do believe that it will bounce back on the back of revenge buying.
Yeah, Caroline is saying the same happened after Fukushima, Japan, 2011. So it has happened before. So one of the viewers asked about the changes in the luxury retail and the luxury malls. I think it's going to be my next question, because we're going to talk about the 4 main sectors that we were last year during LuxuryLab Brazil and LuxuryLab Mexico. You mentioned in one of the key findings of LuxuryLab 2019 was that the huge potential for the digital wellness, experiential luxury, and also the sustainability, no, which is one of the missions of LuxuryLab. We will start on digital to talk about a little bit about digital, which has to do also with the changes that we're going to see in the retail market, in the shopping malls and everything. So I think we could start with the first question, which is, with no doubt, the COVID-19 has led to a consumer behavior and consumption patterns shift to digital. What are the key findings and how it should be seen as a long-term opportunity for luxury brands?
So again, I think here brands really need to focus on ensuring they have a strong omni-channel presence. So those brands now that already have a strong omni-channel presence will be faring much better than those that don't. Similarly, brands need to, or retailers need to work on the experience of shopping online. So I think in LuxuryLab Mexico and Brazil, I think I showed some numbers on results from a survey we did with businesses, asking them which were the or which technologies they thought would be most disruptive in the future, and things like artificial intelligence,
virtual reality.
Yeah. So they came out on top. But as we move forward, we may be, already, like China, for example, are using robotics for for the last mile delivery. So that instead of having a courier or a postman or UPS or whatever delivering your goods, a robot is delivering it. So that completely takes the human out of the equation or the supply chain altogether. So yeah, we need to look at things like robotics. We need to look at more kind of virtual reality, even holograms. Where you're actually there in the store, and you think So even things like this, or even things like digital printing, is that something that we're going to see? So ultimately, be that we so used to being at home, and that whole at home consumer trend kind of remains. It could be that digital printing becomes a thing that you can actually print something out. I'm not sure whether Caroline would agree that we could print out a Rolex watch. But I mean, it could be something,
she could be prepared for that.
So, and also things like I mentioned blockchain and biometrics. So blockchain again might be very useful for payment platforms as we move forward for security. So I mean, that's one area that blockchain really comes into play because it is so secure. And I know lots of people, the more that we shop online, the more exposure or the more vulnerable we become as consumers. Biometrics, again, really important as we move forward, for not just for identity, but also for screening, health screening. So, it could be that, you go into a store and they, or whatever, or you're at the airport and, by default, your temperature is taken, or so obviously there's so much that digital can do, and ultimately the more time that we spend at home, the more digital is going to play a role, whether that's just for the shopping or even the service or the communication aspect as well.
Yeah, you also mentioned during your webinar about Burberry, which was one of the most important companies working, and the pioneer working with Instagram and social media in the luxury market. And now you mentioned that they are doing a great job in terms of digital. If you want to say a little bit about that.
Yes, so for, as you say, so for Burberry, they for many, many years were really leaders in the digital world. But they were kind of more leaders in the in-store digital experience. So you would go into, let's say, the store in London on their flagship store on Regent Street, and they had these magic mirrors, so you wouldn't have to try clothes on. Similarly, there was lots of digital acoustics in the stores. So you might think that one minute you'd be shopping and the next minute there would be like a rainstorm, obviously, because Burberry are famous for their trench coats. It's London, it rains, although it's not raining now. Thank God. So this is kind of what they were celebrated for. And then they realized actually they need to kind of pull things back in, and they need to go back to basics, and they need to use digital to enhance the customer experience in terms of customer service. So, ultimately, at the end of the day, buying from a luxury brand, you should have the best luxury service in the world. And this is what they thought, okay, they was investing all this time in the in-store experience, but actually they now need to go back to basics and put that back into the customer. So they took out all of the kind of in-store luxury experience, and they invested all that money in the customer service. So using digital kind of at the back end to, so they came up with these amazing super apps. So these they started working on in 2018, 2019. So already now, they all had these platforms in place. I mean, obviously, nobody could have predicted what was going to happen, but for those brands like Burberry that invested in digital, that went that one step further to realize actually they need to offer more through digital. They need to offer that customer service element through digital, and obviously launch these, their own super apps, or chat boxes, or to kind of to meet the demands of the aspirational consumer. So now obviously they will be benefiting from this.
Yeah, and also it was a very interesting example because we were talking about Rolex, about the 3D that you mentioned. Carol doesn't believe that will happen one day. She just mentioned that.
I don't think many people will believe.
But also there is something that we never imagined, like Patek Philippe say selling online. So that's something distributors of Patek Philippe is now authorized to sell online. That is something. It was a very traditional. It's a very traditional brand which is breaking this taboo.
Yeah, and I think that's probably something that we will see more of. So if we look at what happened with Hermes, for example, in Shanghai when they opened the store again, and they took billions in one day when they opened the store. Hermes, they sell so little online that I guess it kind of. It goes without saying that as soon as the store opened, that everybody went to buy products that they couldn't buy online in the store, as well as having the in-store experience. So I think we are going to see more brands being forced to sell more products online, or to kind of open up their digital platforms. And yeah, I mean it's.
Well, and another question that one of the viewers has is about the growth of digital world, people buying online. You mentioned something around 12% worldwide, right, Fleur, in terms of digital sales?
Yes, so by the end of last year, globally, in personal luxury, only about 12% was digital or online. But moving forward, we believe that growth could be around 700% for 2020. Wow. So obviously, and it could even be that by the end of the year, it's probably highly likely that digital will overtake in-store or store-based sales as we move forward. Or even we're seeing now, so Tmall, for example, in China, they've launched a outlet for the first time. So obviously, because all these stores have products which obviously they're going to end up with surplus stock. And the last thing that any brand wants to do is get rid of that stock. We already had huge issues when it was released that all of these brands were burning their stock. So that's an area of concern moving forward. So I think we're going to see obviously more off or reduced products being sold online, or even in markets like South Korea, they're also authorizing some brands to sell duty-free online. So although you're not, it isn't travel retail as such, that they're allowing that stock to be sold at travel retail prices. Otherwise, it would just sit in warehouses, and that's the last thing that anybody wants.
Yeah, before talking about experience and wellness, there's someone asking about the automotive industry. Fleur, you mentioned before, but maybe would be nice to say how, because it's a large industry with so many employees, and how this, if you could go a little bit deeper about the automotive industry, would be nice. The impact.
So cars overall, I mean, given their price, they account for over half of all luxury goods. So of course, that's going to be massive. But I think, also, I know we may touch on sustainability, but that's been a big area. And I think now, we're hearing these wonderful stories of, nature developing in ways that we never thought possible, because we have clean air, that there are no cars on the road, there's no noise, animals are behaving in a way, or nature's behaving in a way that we never knew possible. Again, so not only kind of the sustainability side, but the wellness and the health side. So if you think of the quality of the air, and people maybe being more concerned about their lung health and breathing, and how important having clean air is. And I think these are all things that we were already talking about, but I think are going to become more of a concern. So maybe the likes of Tesla with their electric car model, and they're only electric, so obviously they may benefit. Similarly, you can't buy a car online unless you're Tesla. So Tesla did very well again. So in 2019, they announced that they would only be selling cars online or digitally. So from that point of view, I could now, if I wanted to buy a Tesla, it would be relatively straightforward. Whereas in most cases, you have to go to a showroom to buy even a new luxury car. You have to go to a showroom. So from that point of view as well, you can't even buy a car if you want. So again, it's kind of being hit from all angles. So much like the travel industry, but in different ways, it's been hit from all angles. Yeah,
that's what we're gonna talk now. It's about wellness, and the health and wellness industry recorded $473 billion in 2019. In light of the pandemic, high-income consumers have increased their use of at-home fitness programs or measures to manage stress, anxiety, or mental health. It has even invested in bringing luxury wellness in the safety of their own home. In this luxury segment, expected to grow how much is expected to grow in 2020, Fleur? And a good example about the growth of the wellness at home is like a company like Peloton. So I saw the stock market for this company is amazing. So it's growing in contradiction to what's going on in the stock markets. But if you could talk a little bit about this market, would be beautiful.
Yeah. So again, kind of before the outbreak took place, wellness or health and wellness were becoming increasingly important, and we were investing more, not only just in our physical health, but our mental health, our spiritual health. So these were already elements that kind of were in place, and I think I kind of mentioned in previous sentences that health was becoming the new wealth, and how health and wellness were almost becoming a status symbol. And I think kind of moving forward, that kind of whole wellness thing will expand further. But I think again, even more is going to be about not just our physical health, our lung health, but even more about our kind of mental health, and how we will be dealing with issues around anxiety, stress, sleep. So these were already things that we were seeing companies invest in, but I think again that's going to be kind of an area that we move further towards. But obviously, being at home, that's kind of going to be maybe an issue for brands reaching these consumers. So that's where, again, if we go back to how personal luxury has benefited from their expansion on digital, it's the same with fitness or wellness. So any brand that already was in the fitness tech area or had, you know, a strong kind of online presence, then naturally, you know, they will fare better, or they will be able to ride this storm better than other brands. So yeah, so Peloton, for example, relies purely on their digital presence. At the same time, we're seeing brands like SoulCycle, they're going online. Obviously, you have to buy a SoulCycle bike, but then you can then take part in a SoulCycle class. We're seeing the same in the UK. So there's a company called Cycle London, so they're doing the same thing. But naturally, you have to buy the bike in the first place, and
yeah, the same in Mexico.
It costs about, you know, £2,000-3,000, or in the US, I mean, a Peloton bike is, you know, you're looking at about $6,000 for the bike, and there's a treadmill as well. So, and then on top of that, there's the subscription. So it's definitely aimed at the more affluent consumer that can. But going even further, we're seeing consumers, or an increase in the number of consumers bringing wellness into the home. So they're actually, you know, creating luxury spas in their own home. I mean, this is something that obviously can't happen overnight, but it was something that was growing before the outbreak. And we've spoken to companies that specialize in these at-home spas and wellness suites. And they are already seeing that they're having an increase in demand for future building work to be carried out. Which,
yeah, very interesting. There's people asking for plastic surgery, but let's wait for this question. Let's go to experience. So during LuxuryLab Mexico, LuxuryLab Brazil, you announced last year that the global experiential sector was set to exceed $60 billion. However, the unexpected travel lockdown has dramatically changed the luxury experiential forecast for 2020. What is the revised forecast, and how luxury hospitality is dealing with closures and falling global demand?
So in terms of travel flows, I guess the best case scenario for 2020 is a contraction of 25% globally for the travel market. In markets like the US, similarly around the same decline. We do think that there will be a hike, but it's going to then kind of slow down again. So we believe that it'll be at least 2 years before the travel aspect of the experiential luxury area will recover. In the meantime, we're seeing some wonderful work that's, so luxury hotels, for example, as you probably know, have all been shut down. Luxury restaurant or any kind of hospitality or food service has been shut down. So much like the wonderful work that LuxuryLab is doing in Mexico, we're seeing kind of luxury hotels opening their doors to around the world. So I think it started off with the Plaza Hotel in New York, or the Four Seasons. Maybe it was the Four Seasons that started off in New York, opening their doors to key workers and nurses, doctors, but also opening their kitchens to supply food, either again for key workers or for, you know, the homeless or the elderly, vulnerable people. So, you know, on the one side, there's a huge philanthropic move or project taking place, which, you know, again is a wonderful way of being able to deal with this. But we're also seeing some, you know, there's no way that, you know, the fact that these hotels are closed, they'll be able to get the money back in at least in the short to medium term. But we're seeing lots of hotels offering at-home services, whether that's online tutorials on how to replicate the kind of the luxury home experience, or to have that whole luxury service in your own home, or doing food delivery. So that's something that we're seeing. So instead of obviously going to a restaurant or a wonderful hotel to eat in their restaurant, they're doing home deliveries, and that's something that's So it was already starting at least a month or 2 months ago, but more and more we're seeing Michelin-starred restaurants opening up, and I think it's going to, at least for the short to medium term, going to become kind of the norm that these restaurants will deliver to your home. But at the same time, when we look at kind of the experience of shopping, or the experience of beauty, or the experience of wellness, these are all things that we're going to see moving into home. So again, digital will be paramount. So Six Senses, for example, they're offering a project, or it's a service called At Home with Six Senses. So kind of following their 6 principles of wellness, and obviously they have all of their wellness gurus to offer guidance, whether that's your diet, whether that's sleep, whether that's your emotional or mental well-being, or whether it's offering yoga classes. So I think this is something that we are definitely going to see more of.
Yeah, and also people are asking about connecting to the consumer with the new normal that we have right now. But it's exactly what we're going to talk. We are going from sustainability to purpose. When we launched LuxuryLab in 2011, we brought WWF. We were talking about sustainability, how important it was, and it is for the luxury market. All the responsibility that the luxury market has, as you mentioned, during this pandemic. Many brands like Four Seasons, LuxuryLab is working social responsibility. Most of the brands, LVMH, Kering Group, all of them are doing an amazing job. So it would be very interesting to see these examples. We saw Bulgari doing these hand sanitizers. So it was so interesting to see. So sustainability is not enough anymore. Like you need also to have a purpose.
Yeah.
So high-income consumers become much more conscious about their shopping, and they are giving preference to buy from purpose-driven brands, not from profit-driven brands. So how this change in consumer behavior, it's a consequence of the pandemic, but it's also has been started like a few years ago. What do you think about that, Fleur?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anything, what this pandemic has done is to expose those profit-driven brands, as opposed to brands with purpose, or luxury brands that put people before profit. And I think this is something, whilst at the moment people are, although we're witnessing all this wonderful thing happening with nature outside, owing to the fact that we're not polluting the world in the way that we were, at least for there's been a stop on that. That for the time being, I think people are more concerned about, so it's gone from planet's health to people health. So there is a concern that for a short period, all of these sustainability projects have been put on hold. There is a concern that we have gone from a world where we don't throw anything away to everything being disposable. So all these wipes that we're using and cleaning products that we're using. So there is a concern for literally the short term that there has been that these projects have been put on hold, but moving forward, we believe that this is going to become even greater. That our concern for the environment, for sustainability, and in return, all these brands like LVMH, like Kering, or the luxury hotels that have done some wonderful philanthropic projects. I think that will, in return, lead to customer loyalty, employee loyalty, and consumers will want to belong or be part of those brands a lot more moving forward.
Yeah, exactly. We saw that going back to Gucci, the protection equipment, clothing that they are giving to people in hospitals in France and in other places. It has been a very interesting job in terms of social responsibility. We don't see many, I don't know, maybe we have, but one of the questions that people are doing, our viewers, is about premium brands, Flor. So not luxury brands, but premium brands. Are they working with that too? I saw some premium brands doing some small jobs, mainly Mexico. Local brands are doing small social responsibility, which they also are considered luxury brands in Mexico. Are different ones, and they are very interesting what they are doing for in terms of philanthropy, in terms of social responsibility. They are supporting our activities in terms of LuxuryLab, the food that I told you in the beginning about the meals that we are delivering for homeless and also for people that lost their employees. So do you think premium brands is different from luxury brands, in your opinion, in terms of social responsibility, what they are doing?
Well, from what we're seeing, it's something definitely that's taking place in the luxury market.
Yeah.
And I think this is, again, it kind of just highlights how these brands already have these models in place to put people before profit. They're also maybe a bit more susceptible to change, to changing their business model. So, as you mentioned, LVMH turning their fragrance factories to make hand sanitizers, or Bulgari making masks, or so there's a lot more flexibility. But then you also have to remember that their margins are much wider. Their factories are generally smaller. Their production is much smaller. So, and they generally have their capital is a lot bigger. So I guess maybe from that point of view, there's a bit more to give, or there's a bit more leeway, as opposed to maybe some of the fast fashion brands. On the same breath as fast fashion, I think more and more is going to slow down. I think more and more consumers will be looking at products that offer long-term investment, that are made well, that have good heritage. Going back to the issue of localism, again, I think people will be looking more at labels to see where products are being made. So I think from that point of view as well, I think fast fashion may slow down even more as we move forward, and people kind of really start thinking about their behavior and how they're spending their money.
And so, well, we finished all the questions. So what would like to hear you always do an amazing summary of your presentations. So what are the key findings of the recent market research brought by Euromonitor last week?
So, I mean, a lot of what we're seeing is just basically, it's amplifying what we already kind of believed. So things like staying relevant to your consumer, creating dialogues with your customers, using digital technology, providing a strong omni-channel experience, but also things like making sure that your products talk about wellness, they talk about sustainability, and I guess that probably nobody could have foreseen what we're going through right now. So I think, again, although there's so much that's happening digitally, not forgetting the human element, and although luxury was becoming more empathetic, and especially the younger consumers, they wanted good, honest, open relationships with their brands. I think that will become even more important and paramount as we move forward. So kind of making sure that that human engagement and connection is there, even if that is through the digital platforms.
Oh, great, Flor. There are people also mentioning there are many local companies in Brazil, Mexico, Argentina. We know many of them. We would like to thank all the efforts they are doing in terms of philanthropy in Latin America. We really need their support. I will do another question because they are asking, I think this is not part of the research that Euromonitor did, but maybe if you can have any answer about the fast fashion that you mentioned, do you know more or less if is there any number in terms of how much it could drop in the next years? I don't think we have any this information, right, Fleur, in the fast fashion market.
Fast fashion alone, no, but in terms of clothing and footwear, which would include fast fashion, we believe it's going to fall by about 10%.
Okay.
So for the total fashion industry, and probably a lot of that will be in fast fashion, I think, as this whole, when we come out of this whole kind of throwaway mindset, I think will kind of be kind of at our forefront, and how we really do need to start thinking about long-term implications of our behavior.
Well, I would like also to mention that you were supposed to be in Mexico next week, because LuxuryLab was supposed to be in 2 weeks, in June 8th, the 10th edition. So we postponed the 10th edition of LuxuryLab for next year, 2021. The topic for this year was supposed to be the next level of experiential luxury. Of course, we're going to change. We're going to think what's going to be the topic, the main topic for next year. We would like to welcome everyone on this live. And Fleur, I give you some words. We have been working together so many years. So if you want to say anything to most of the people that are watching us, are people that have been in LuxuryLab in the past. So if you want to say anything.
Yes, just that, I can't wait to be back in Mexico, back in Brazil, and see you all again. I'm all dreaming about Mexico, and I think, oh yes, this time last year I would have been in Mexico. So yeah, just really, and the wonderful thing is every time I have been to Mexico or Brazil, every year I go, I'm just always taken away by how advanced the luxury market has become, and these wonderful shopping malls, and how much investment has gone into this area. And obviously now it's a major concern that for everyone, but obviously for markets that maybe aren't necessarily your key luxury shopping destination. It's amazing to see it, and obviously I'm concerned moving forward that the market does pick up, and I can't wait to be there.
Well, we're looking forward.
Hopefully I'll have some positive things to say.
Oh, Ingrid Bruja, everybody's saying hi. So thank you so much, everyone, and looking forward to seeing you next year. But also, we're going to announce new lives. We started with Euromonitor, but we're going to have new lives for next week. So please don't miss it. Thank you so much, Fleur.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye, take care. Beijinhos.